The text that destroyed James Parker's life was sent at exactly 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, a flirty message meant for his dinner date that accidentally went to Victoria Reynolds, CEO of the pharmaceutical company that held his daughter's life in their hands. His stomach dropped as he stared at his phone in horror, realizing his catastrophic mistake. Looking forward to tonight. Can't stop thinking about your smile and wondering what it would be like to kiss you. James had 5 minutes of panic before his doorbell rang, 5 minutes to contemplate how he just torpedoed his last chance to get his 8-year-old daughter Lily into the experimental treatment program that could save her life. Victoria Reynolds, known throughout the business world as the Ice Queen, had personally driven to his modest suburban home after receiving his message. As he approached the door with trembling hands, James knew this wasn't just embarrassing, it was potentially devastating. Without Reynolds Pharmaceuticals' treatment program, Lily's rare immune disorder would continue to progress, and the single father would lose the only person left in his world who mattered. When he opened the door, Victoria Reynolds stood on his porch looking nothing like her polished magazine covers. Her normally perfect blonde hair was slightly windblown, and her piercing blue eyes were wide with an emotion James couldn't identify. She mortgage, but something about her seemed almost human. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "I believe we need to discuss the message you sent me." James felt his face burn with shame. "Ms. Reynolds, I am so incredibly sorry. That text was never meant." She held up one perfectly manicured hand. "May I come in? I think we have more to discuss than just an errant text message." Confused and terrified, James stepped aside to let her enter his home. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, and dishes from breakfast still sat in the sink. He'd been so focused on preparing for tomorrow's meeting with Reynolds Pharmaceuticals, his last hope for getting Lily into their treatment program, that housekeeping had fallen by the wayside. "Daddy? Who's here?" Lily appeared in the hallway, her small frame swimming in a too-large unicorn pajama set, her once thick brown hair now thin from treatments. Despite everything, her smile still lit up the room. What happened next left James speechless. Victoria Reynolds, the woman whose ruthless business tactics had earned her the nickname, the Ice Queen, knelt down to Lily's level. "Hello there. I'm Victoria. I work at the company that makes medicine." Her voice had transformed completely, warm and gentle where moments before it had been controlled and professional. "Are you the lady who can help make me better?" Lily asked with the directness only children possess. Victoria's composed expression faltered for just a moment. "I'm certainly going to try," she said, and James could have sworn he saw her eyes glisten. "Would it be okay if I talked to your dad for a little while?" After Lily reluctantly returned to her room, Victoria turned to James with an intensity that made him nervous. "Your daughter is the reason you've been trying to meet with my company for the past 4 months." "Yes," James admitted. "Lily has Harrington syndrome. Your company's experimental treatment is showing the most promise, but we've been denied entry into the trial 3 times. Tomorrow's appeal was our last chance." Victoria's gaze traveled around the modest home, taking in the family photos, the medical bills stacked on the counter, the calendar on the wall marked with hospital appointments. "You're raising her alone. Her mother died when Lily was 4. Car accident." The words still felt raw, even after 4 years. "Look, about that text." "The text is why I'm here," Victoria interrupted, her voice suddenly businesslike again. "Mr. Parker, I received your message during a board meeting. I excused myself to read your file, and what I found disturbed me greatly." She pulled out her tablet and showed him his application history. "Your case should have been prioritized months ago. Someone buried it deliberately." James felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "What? Why would anyone do that?" Victoria's expression hardened. "That's exactly what I intend to find out. But first, I want to hear about Lily, not from a clinical file, but from her father." James ran his hand through his dark brown hair, the stress of the past years visible in the premature gray at his temples. At 36, he looked older, the weight of being both mother and father to a seriously ill child etched into the lines around his warm hazel eyes. His faded jeans and simple blue button-down shirt were a stark contrast to Victoria's polished appearance. "I don't even know where to begin," he said, gesturing for her to sit at the small kitchen table. "Coffee?" Victoria nodded, setting her designer handbag on the chair beside her. Up close, James noticed details about her that never appeared in business magazines: a small scar near her right eyebrow, the slight asymmetry of her smile, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. At 42, Victoria Reynolds had built an empire, but sitting in his cluttered kitchen, she seemed more approachable than her reputation suggested. "Lily was always healthy until she turned 6, James began, placing a mug of coffee in front of Victoria. "She came home from school with a fever one day. We thought it was just a cold, but it never went away. Then came the joint pain, the rashes, the constant infections." His voice caught. 3 doctors and 6 months later, we finally got the diagnosis. Harrington syndrome. Victoria listened intently as James described the rare autoimmune disorder that caused Lily's immune system to attack her own tissues. He explained the failed treatments, the hospitalizations, the way Lily's once boundless energy had diminished as the disease progressed. "She used to dance," he said softly, showing Victoria a photo on his phone of a younger, healthier Lily in a ballet costume. "Now she gets winded walking to the mailbox. The standard immunosuppressants help with the symptoms but cause other problems. Your company's targeted therapy is the first real hope we've had." Victoria's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly as she studied the photo. "And you've been denied entry to the trial 3 times? "Yes. First they said her case wasn't severe enough. Then they said it was too severe. The last rejection just said, 'Not eligible,' with no explanation." James's frustration was evident. "Tomorrow's appeal was our last shot. I was going to bring all her medical records, letters from her doctors, anything to convince them." Victoria's blue eyes flashed with something that looked like anger. "You shouldn't have had to fight this hard." She pulled out her phone and sent a rapid-fire text, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "I'm having my assistant pull every communication about Lily's case. I want to know exactly who made these decisions and why." That evening, sitting at his kitchen table with one of the most powerful women in the pharmaceutical industry, James shared Lily's journey, the devastating diagnosis at age 6, the failed treatments, the mounting medical bills that had forced him to sell their family home and move to this smaller house. As a high school science teacher, his salary and insurance covered the basics, but the experimental treatments were financially out of reach without the clinical trial. "She's so brave," James said, his voice breaking as he showed Victoria photos of Lily before her illness, a vibrant little girl with wild curly hair and a mischievous smile. "She never complains, even on her worst days." Victoria listened intently, occasionally making notes on her tablet. When Lily called out for a glass of water, James excused himself. Upon returning, he found Victoria standing by the bookshelf, studying a photo of him and Lily at the beach last summer. "She has your eyes," Victoria observed softly. Then, more businesslike, "Mr. Parker, I'm adding Lily to the treatment program effective immediately. I'll have the paperwork delivered tomorrow." James nearly dropped the water glass. "Just like that? But we've been trying for months." Victoria's expression darkened. "Yes, and I'll be addressing that internal failure tomorrow. Someone deliberately obstructed your application, and I intend to find out who and why." She closed her tablet with a decisive click. "But that's not your concern. Your concern is Lily, and I promise you she will get the treatment she needs." As the night deepened, Victoria revealed something that stunned James. "My younger sister had Harrington syndrome. 20 years ago, before there were any effective treatments." Her perfectly composed facade cracked slightly. "That's why I built Reynolds Pharmaceuticals the way I did, to develop treatments for rare diseases that other companies ignore because they're not profitable enough. I had no idea, James said softly. Your company bio doesn't mention a sister. Some things are too personal for corporate websites, Victoria replied, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. Sophia was 12 when she died. I was 17 and promised her I'd find a way to help other children like her. She looked toward Lily's bedroom. Children like your daughter. Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at it, her expression shifting from open vulnerability to something harder. I need to make a call. Do you mind? James gestured toward the back porch. Take your time. Through the kitchen window, he watched as Victoria paced the small wooden deck, her posture rigid as she spoke into her phone. Even from a distance, he could see the transformation. The warm, compassionate woman who had sat at his table was gone, replaced by the formidable CEO whose reputation struck fear into pharmaceutical executives across the country. Her free hand gestured sharply as she spoke, her expression intense. This was the Victoria Reynolds the business world knew, commanding, uncompromising, fierce. When she returned, some of that intensity lingered in her eyes. I've just spoken with my head of clinical trials. There appears to have been interference in Lily's case. Someone with a personal agenda. What kind of interference? James asked, alarmed. Victoria hesitated, choosing her words carefully. My ex-husband sits on the board. He oversees the clinical trial division. It seems he's been selective about which cases receive approval. Your ex-husband blocked my daughter's treatment? James felt a surge of anger. Why would he do that? Because he knew it would matter to me, Victoria said quietly. He's been bitter since our divorce 3 years ago. He knows how personal the Harringtons' research is to me because of Sophia. Her composed expression faltered for a moment. I never imagined he would stoop to using patients as pawns in his vendetta against me. James struggled to process this information. So if I hadn't sent that text by mistake, he would have continued blocking Lily's application, and I might never have known about it, Victoria finished. Corporate bureaucracy is very effective at burying things. The realization that his daughter's life had been caught in the crossfire of a corporate power struggle made James feel sick. That's monstrous. Yes, Victoria agreed, her voice hard. And he will be removed from the board by this time tomorrow. I've already called an emergency meeting. She looked at James with unexpected gentleness. But none of that matters for Lily. What matters is that she starts treatment immediately. As Victoria prepared to leave, she paused at the door. The treatment program starts next week. I'll send a car for you and Lily on Monday morning. Her professional tone had returned, but something in her eyes had changed. And Mr. Parker? About that text message. James winced. Again, I'm so sorry. It was completely inappropriate, Anne. It was the first genuine human communication I've received in months, she interrupted, surprising him. Everyone is too intimidated to speak to me like a person. Your mistake was refreshing. A hint of a smile touched her lips. Though perhaps save the kissing comments for after we've actually met properly. With that, she was gone, leaving James stunned in his doorway. Had his mortifying text message error actually saved his daughter's life? And why did the notorious Ice Queen seem so different from her fearsome reputation? The next morning, James woke to find a sleek black car parked outside his house. The driver delivered an envelope containing all the paperwork for Lily's admission to the treatment program, along with a handwritten note from Victoria, treatment starts Monday. Don't worry about transportation, a car will pick you up at 8 a.m. My personal cell is included if you have any questions. V. When James told Lily she was starting the new medicine on Monday, her reaction broke his heart. Instead of excitement, her first response was worry. But Daddy, how will we pay for it? You said it costs more than our house. He knelt beside her bed, taking her small hands in his. "We don't have to worry about that anymore, sweetheart. Ms. Reynolds is making sure you get the medicine as part of a special program." Lily's eyes widened. The pretty lady who knows about medicine? Is she going to be there on Monday? "I think she might be," James said, surprised by his daughter's immediate attachment to Victoria. "Good," Lily declared with the certainty only children possess. "I like her. She didn't talk to me like I'm a baby. And she smells nice, like the flowers Mommy used to grow." James felt a lump form in his throat at the mention of Sarah, Lily's mother. In the 4 years since the car accident that took her life, Lily rarely mentioned her mother unprompted. That she would connect Victoria to this precious memory felt significant somehow. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. On Monday morning, precisely at 8 a.m., a black car pulled up outside their house. To James's surprise, Victoria herself stepped out, dressed in a more casual outfit than he'd seen her in before, tailored black pants and a simple blue blouse, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. "Good morning," she said, her smile warming her entire face. "I thought I'd accompany you both today, if that's all right. First days can be intimidating." Lily, who had been nervous all morning, immediately brightened at the sight of Victoria. "You came. Daddy said you might." Victoria knelt to Lily's level, seemingly unconcerned about creasing her expensive clothes. "I wouldn't miss it. And I brought you something." She handed Lily a small gift bag. Inside was a beautiful journal with a night sky cover. "It's for recording your journey," Victoria explained. "When my sister was sick, she kept a journal of all her good days. It helped her remember that even during treatment, there were still beautiful moments." Lily clutched the journal to her chest. "Thank you. I'm going to write about today because it's already a good day." In the car, Victoria explained the treatment process to both of them, breaking down complex medical terminology into language Lily could understand without talking down to her. James watched in amazement as his daughter, normally shy around strangers, peppered Victoria with questions that the CEO answered with infinite patience. At the hospital, James expected Victoria to hand them off to the medical staff and return to her corporate duties. Instead, she stayed through the entire first treatment, working remotely from her laptop during the 4-hour infusion, occasionally stepping out for urgent calls but always returning to Lily's side. When a nurse had trouble finding a vein for Lily's 4, Victoria held the little girl's hand and told her stories about constellations to distract her from the discomfort. When Lily fell asleep during the infusion, Victoria quietly covered her with a blanket, her touch gentle and maternal in a way that made James's heart ache. "You don't have to stay," James said softly as they watched Lily sleep. "I'm sure you have more important things to do." Victoria looked at him with surprise. "More important than this?" She shook her head. "James, I've spent 20 years building a company to create treatments like this. Watching them actually help a child, that's the most important thing I could possibly do today." 3 weeks later, Lily had started the treatment program, and the initial results were promising. Her energy was improving, and the persistent infections that had plagued her were becoming less frequent. James had just tucked her into bed when his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, "Treatment results looking excellent. Would you be available for dinner Friday to discuss Lily's progress?" His finger hovered over the reply button. Their interactions had remained strictly professional during Lily's hospital visits, though he'd caught Victoria watching him with an unreadable expression several times. Was this dinner invitation purely about Lily's medical care, or was there something more to it? Before he could respond, another text arrived. "And to be clear, this is not just about Lily's treatment. I've been thinking about your smile too, James." What James didn't know as he typed his reply was that Victoria was sitting in her car outside his house again, gathering the courage to ring his doorbell. The woman who had built an empire and a reputation for being untouchable was terrified of the feelings this single father and his brave daughter had awakened in her. Could she risk her heart after keeping it carefully guarded for so many years? Victoria gripped her steering wheel, her knuckles white against the black leather. She'd left a board meeting early, making vague excuses about a doctor's appointment. The truth, that she couldn't stop thinking about a high school science teacher with kind eyes and his brave little girl, would have shocked her colleagues. Victoria Reynolds, distracted by feelings? Impossible. Yet here she was, parked outside his modest home for the second time, her heart racing like a teenager's. She'd spent 20 years building her company and reputation, focusing solely on her mission to make life-saving medications accessible. Personal relationships had always been collateral damage to her ambition, necessary sacrifices for the greater good. But something about James Parker and his daughter had slipped past her defenses. Perhaps it was the way he fought so tirelessly for Lily, never becoming bitter despite the obstacles thrown in his path. Perhaps it was seeing her sister's struggle reflected in Lily's brave smile. Or perhaps it was simply that accidental text, so human, so vulnerable, that had reminded her that behind every clinical trial and insurance form were real people with beating hearts. Her phone chimed with James's reply, "Dinner sounds perfect. My parents are taking Lily for the night. 7 p.m. Victoria took a deep breath and started her car. She would come back tomorrow, not as the CEO of Reynolds Pharmaceuticals, but simply as a woman taking a chance on connection for the first time in years. The next evening, Victoria spent an unprecedented amount of time choosing her outfit. Her closet was filled with power suits and formal attire, armor she'd worn to battle her way through the male-dominated pharmaceutical industry. After trying on and discarding 4 different outfits, she finally selected a simple blue dress she'd bought years ago but never worn. It felt strange to dress for something other than intimidation. Her executive assistant had nearly fallen out of her chair when Victoria announced she was leaving at 5 p.m. In 5 years, Diane had never seen her boss leave before 8 p.m. unless it was for another business function. "Is everything all right, Ms. Reynolds?" Diane had asked, concern evident in her voice. "Everything is fine," Victoria had replied, unable to suppress a small smile. "I simply have a personal engagement this evening." "A personal engagement?" Diane had repeated, as if Victoria had announced she was joining the circus. Now, as Victoria approached James's door, she felt a flutter of nervousness she hadn't experienced in decades. She, who regularly faced down hostile boards and government regulators without breaking a sweat, was anxious about dinner with a high school science teacher. Their first official date was at an upscale restaurant where Victoria arrived wearing a simple blue dress instead of her signature power suit. "I haven't worn anything but business attire to dinner in years," she admitted, looking both elegant and somehow vulnerable. "My executive team would be shocked." "You look beautiful," James said honestly. Over dinner, he learned about the real Victoria, the woman who climbed mountains on rare vacations, who had a secret passion for astronomy, and who had sacrificed a personal life to build a company dedicated to her sister's memory. "I became the Ice Queen because it was necessary," she confessed, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "The pharmaceutical industry isn't kind to women who show emotion. Being cold and calculating was the only way to be taken seriously." "And now?" James asked softly. Victoria's eyes met his. "Now I'm terrified. Because for the first time in 20 years, I care about something beyond my company. I care about what happens to Lily, and to you." The restaurant's soft lighting cast a warm glow on her face, softening the sharp angles that looked so intimidating in boardroom photographs. James realized she was letting him see beneath the armor, showing him the woman who had been hiding behind the Ice Queen persona all these years. "You know," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "Lily asks about you every day. She's convinced you're some kind of superhero disguised as a businesswoman." Victoria laughed, a sound so genuine it transformed her face. "I wanted to be an astronaut when I was little. Before." She didn't need to finish. "Before her sister got sick." before her childhood dreams were replaced by a mission. "It's not too late for stargazing," James suggested. "Lily would love to have a stargazing partner." "I try, but I can never remember which constellation is which." "I'd like that," Victoria said softly. "To show her the stars sometime." As the evening progressed, they discovered unexpected commonalities. Both loved classic films, had run marathons, and shared a weakness for mystery novels. When James described his struggle to balance work and Lily's care, Victoria listened with an understanding few others had shown. "After Sophia died, my parents' marriage fell apart," she revealed. "My father buried himself in work, and my mother in grief. I was left to pick up the pieces. That's why I respect what you're doing for Lily so much. You didn't run. You didn't hide. You faced it head-on." When he walked her to her car, the night air cool around them, James found himself drawn to this complex woman who contained multitudes, the ruthless CEO and the stargazer, the ice queen and the wounded sister. When he leaned in to kiss her, she met him halfway, her lips soft and yielding in a way that belied her reputation. "I should warn you," she whispered against his mouth, "I'm not good at this. Relationships. Vulnerability. Any of it." James smiled. "Good thing I accidentally sent you my best flirting material already. It's all downhill from here." Her laughter, free and unguarded, echoed in the quiet street. The next morning, Victoria arrived at her office to find her ex-husband, Richard, waiting in her reception area. His expensive suit and perfectly coiffed silver hair couldn't disguise the anger in his eyes as he followed her into her office. "You had me removed from the board," he said without preamble, his voice cold. 20 years of building this company together, and you throw me out over one case?" Victoria set her briefcase down calmly. "It wasn't just one case, Richard. It was what that case represented. You used a child's life as leverage in your vendetta against me." "That's ridiculous," he scoffed. "The Parker girl didn't meet the trial criteria." "She met every criterion," Victoria countered, her voice dangerously quiet. "I reviewed her file personally. The only reason she was rejected was because you saw my note of interest in her case." Richard's expression hardened. "You've changed, Victoria. There was a time when you understood that business decisions couldn't be personal. Now you're risking a multi-million-dollar trial on some emotional connection to a child who reminds you of Sophia." Victoria felt a familiar cold rage building, but for once, she didn't suppress it. "Get out of my office, Richard. Your severance package is generous. Take it and go start another company where you can prioritize profits over people. That was always your specialty." After he left, Victoria sat at her desk, her hands shaking slightly. For 20 years, she'd played by Richard's rules, compartmentalizing, prioritizing efficiency over empathy, building walls between herself and the patients her company served. Meeting James and Lily had made her question everything about the woman she'd become. That weekend, Victoria joined James and Lily for a picnic in the park. She arrived carrying a telescope and a star chart, much to Lily's delight. As the little girl examined the telescope with wonder, Victoria found herself studying James. In his worn jeans and faded t-shirt, he looked nothing like the polished executives she usually associated with. His hands were those of a working man, a teacher who did his own home repairs and carried his daughter when she was too tired to walk. When he caught her watching him and smiled, Victoria felt something inside her shift and settle. As weeks turned into months, Victoria became a regular presence in their lives. She brought Lily astronomy books and taught her to use the telescope she gifted her. She joined them for movie nights and Sunday pancake breakfasts. The woman who had once been known for making pharmaceutical executives tremble was now the same woman who sat on the floor building Lego sets with an increasingly healthy 8-year-old. James watched in amazement as Lily blossomed under the new treatment, and as Victoria blossomed away from the corporate world that had defined her for so long. The first time he kissed her properly was on his back porch while Lily slept inside. Victoria had been explaining constellations, her face animated with passion, when James couldn't resist any longer. "I've been wanting to do that since that first night you showed up at my door," he admitted afterward. Victoria smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "I've been wanting you to do that since I read that accidental text." The first time Victoria stayed the night, she woke to find Lily standing beside the bed, studying her curiously. Victoria had frozen, unsure of the protocol for this situation, but Lily had simply asked, "Are you going to make pancakes with us? Daddy makes them in funny shapes but they all end up looking like blobs." That morning, Victoria Reynolds, who had never cooked breakfast for anyone in her adult life, found herself in James's kitchen, attempting to make a pancake shaped like Saturn. When it too turned into an unidentifiable blob, Lily's peals of laughter had filled the kitchen, and Victoria had found herself laughing too, flour on her cheek and happiness bubbling in her chest. Not everyone approved of the relationship. Victoria's board members expressed concern about her distraction, and some of James's fellow teachers raised eyebrows at his dating a pharmaceutical executive. But as Lily's health improved dramatically under the treatment, their critics fell silent. The results spoke for themselves, not just for Lily, but for the dozens of other children Victoria had personally added to the trial after reviewing cases that had been previously rejected. "You're changing your whole company," James observed one evening as they reviewed the latest trial results. "All because of one misdirected text." Victoria looked thoughtful. "No, not because of the text. Because it made me see what I'd been missing. I built Reynolds to help children like Sophia, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of the actual children. I became so focused on the science and the business that I forgot about the people." 6 months after the text message that changed everything, James and Lily moved into Victoria's home, a beautiful house with a garden where Lily could play and a dedicated observatory dome on the roof. Reynolds Pharmaceuticals had expanded their rare disease program, helping dozens of children like Lily access life-saving treatments regardless of their family's financial situations. "You know," James said one evening as they watched Lily running through the sprinklers in the backyard, her strength fully returned, "that text was the best mistake I ever made." Victoria laughed, a sound that had become wonderfully familiar. "I saved it, you know. In a special folder on my phone." She leaned against him. "Though the reality of kissing you is much better than just wondering about it." The transformation in Victoria didn't go unnoticed in the business world. Financial magazines that had once described her as ruthlessly efficient and coldly brilliant now used terms like innovative and compassionate pioneer. Reynolds Pharmaceuticals' new patient-centered approach was revolutionizing how rare disease treatments were developed and distributed. "They're calling you the Queen with a Heart now," James teased one morning, showing her a business magazine cover featuring her photo. Victoria rolled her eyes. "Journalists and their ridiculous nicknames." "I don't know," Lily chimed in, looking up from her breakfast. "I think it's better than Ice Queen. Hearts are warmer than ice." Victoria couldn't argue with that logic. 1 year to the day after the misdirected text, James knelt in their garden while Lily held a small velvet box. When Victoria came home from work and saw them waiting, she froze, her hand flying to her mouth. "You changed our lives by showing up at our door that day," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved Lily, but you also saved me from a life of fear and loneliness. We love you, Victoria. Will you marry us?" Lily bounced excitedly. "Please say yes. I already told everyone at school you're going to be my mom." Tears, something the business world would have sworn Victoria Reynolds was incapable of, streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to speak. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, she showed James a screenshot she'd saved on her phone, his accidental text message from a year ago. "I look at it whenever I need courage," she whispered. "It reminds me that sometimes the best things in life come from our mistakes." Their wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden of their home with Lily as the flower girl. Victoria's assistant Diane, who had watched her boss transform from the ice queen to a woman who now left work at reasonable hours and took weekends off, served as her maid of honor. James's parents, who had initially been wary of Victoria's wealth and status, had become her champions after seeing how she loved their son and granddaughter. 2 years later, Victoria gave birth to twins, a boy they named Michael after James's father, and a girl they named Sophia after Victoria's sister. Lily, now a healthy 11-year-old with a passion for astronomy and medicine, took her role as big sister with the same determination she'd shown in fighting her illness. The Harrington syndrome treatment that had saved Lily's life received full FDA approval, and Reynolds Pharmaceuticals established a foundation ensuring that no family would be denied access due to financial constraints. Victoria still ran the company, but with a new philosophy that balanced business success with human compassion. Their story, from a mortifying text error to a family made whole, became something of a legend among their friends and family. If you've ever made a mistake that felt like the end of the world, remember James and Victoria. Sometimes what seems like our worst moment can open doors we never imagined. Life's greatest gifts often arrive in unexpected packages, and second chances come in the strangest forms. If this story touched your heart today, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that even our errors can lead to something beautiful when we have the courage to face them honestly.
Her poor girl returns a wallet full of money to a young billionaire, but when he opens it and reads, "I'm sorry, I took a bill to buy bread for my hungry little brother. I promise I'll pay you back," he can't hold back his tears. James Morgan opened his eyes to the sound of the customized alarm in his penthouse bedroom. Another day, another morning under New York's gray sky, which he watched through the glass walls on the 54th floor. 30 years old, a billionaire, and completely alone. 5 minutes later, he was on his high-end treadmill, running nowhere. Like his life, he thought. Always running, never arriving. "Good morning, Mr. Morgan. Breakfast is served and your day's schedule has been updated." The housekeeper's voice interrupted his thoughts as he wiped the sweat from his face. He couldn't recall her name, even though she'd worked for him for, how long now? A year? 2. "Thank you, Mrs. Harris, sir." "Mrs. Harris." James nodded, embarrassed. A woman prepared his breakfast every day, and he barely knew her name. Seated at the dining table that could accommodate 16 people, never used beyond one-place setting, James flipped through financial reports while sipping freshly squeezed orange juice. Morgan Enterprises' fortune grew by millions daily. The numbers glowed on his tablet screen, but they sparked no reaction in him. Board meeting at 9 a.m., lunch with investors at 12:30 p.m., interview for Fortune at 3 p.m., charity cocktail at 7 p.m. It was Helen, his assistant, on speakerphone. James mumbled a confirmation, swallowing the last piece of toast without tasting it. "Any call from my sister?" "No, sir." "Of course not." Sarah had cut ties after their last fight about the family empire, 2 years without speaking to the only person who might understand what it was like to be a Morgan. The private elevator descended 60 floors in silence. In the underground garage, his driver was already waiting next to the black Bentley. "Good morning, Mr. Morgan." James tried to recall the driver's name, too. Frank, Fred, good grief. When had he become this kind of person? The board meeting passed in a blur of faces and numbers. James nodded at the right moments, asked the expected questions. His presence was more symbolic than necessary. The machine ran perfectly without him. At the lunch with investors, he heard fake laughter and empty praise. The people around him treated him like a deity. No one contradicted him. No one truly talked to him. "You're a visionary, Mr. Morgan. Your strategy for the Asian market is brilliant." James smiled mechanically. They were not interested in him, but in his money and his last name. He was an asset, not a person. The interview for Fortune was more of the same. What's it like to be the youngest self-made billionaire on the list this year? Self-made. The term almost made him laugh. Yes, he had multiplied the fortune he'd inherited, but calling a Morgan self-made was, at best, journalistic overreach. "It's a great responsibility," he replied with the rehearsed phrase. At 6 p.m., back at the apartment to change clothes for the charity cocktail, James paused in front of the mirror. A perfectly tailored tuxedo, a $500,000 watch on his wrist, handcrafted Italian shoes. The perfect picture of success. So why did his eyes look so lifeless? His phone vibrated. A message from Melissa, or was it Monica, the model who would accompany him to the event, hired by the PR team, of course. A real relationship would require time, vulnerability, things James didn't have or didn't know how to offer. "I need to clear my head," he muttered to his own reflection. A sudden decision took shape. He dismissed the car, ignored Helen's calls about his absence at the cocktail. For the first time in months, years maybe, James Morgan walked alone through the streets of New York. People passed by in a hurry, not recognizing him without the context of luxury cars and bodyguards. It was liberating. The cool early evening air, the noise of the living city. Everything felt more real than the artificial world he lived in. 3 blocks later, James realized he was hungry. Not the social hunger of starred restaurants, but actual hunger. On the corner, a small bakery emitted the smell of fresh bread. The sign, worn out, read Gordon's Bakery. He hesitated at the entrance. A simple place. No reservations, no valet, no welcome champagne. James hadn't been to places like this since he couldn't remember. A bell chimed when he opened the door. A few people at simple tables barely looked up. The glass counter displayed breads, cakes, and sandwiches. No fancy French or Italian names on the handwritten menu, just honest food. "May I help you?" asked a middle-aged man in a white apron stained with flour. James ordered a coffee and a roast beef sandwich, sitting at a corner table. The coffee came in a simple mug, very different from the china he was used to. It was hot and strong, better than any gourmet espresso he'd ever had. "First time here?" asked the man behind the counter as he wiped his hands on the apron. "Yes," James replied, surprised by the casual conversation. "I'm Gordon. This bakery has been my home for 30 years, he said with genuine pride. James observed the man. Gordon didn't have luxury cars or private jets, but there was something in his eyes that James envied instantly: contentment. As he bit into the sandwich, James realized he hadn't felt this present, this connected to a moment in years. In the simplicity of that bakery, he experienced something all his money couldn't buy: authenticity. Finishing his meal, James stood up to pay. He took out a wallet stuffed with $100 bills. He wasn't in the habit of carrying smaller amounts. His phone vibrated non-stop in his pocket. Helen, the PR team, messages about his no-show at the event. He ignored them all. "Come back anytime," Gordon said with a sincere smile. James nodded, feeling an unusual lightness. Maybe he really would come back. Maybe he needed more moments like this. On the way out, he slipped the wallet into his jacket pocket, unaware it wasn't fully inside. A small oversight that, unbeknownst to him, was about to change his life forever. The black leather wallet slid quietly from James's pocket as he left the bakery. It fell onto the damp sidewalk without making a sound, like a whispered secret that no one was meant to hear. James, still thinking about the strange sense of peace he had felt in the bakery, kept walking down the darkening street, completely oblivious to what he had just lost. The wallet remained there for almost 20 minutes, unconsciously avoided by the hurried footsteps of New Yorkers. Then 2 small pairs of feet showed up on the sidewalk. They belonged to Lily and Noah Miller. Lily, just 5 years old, held onto her 3-year-old brother Noah's hand tightly. Her thin fingers were interlaced in a grip that conveyed protection, responsibility, and fear. Both had pale faces and slightly blue lips from the autumn night's cold. They wore no shoes, only torn socks that barely shielded their feet from the icy pavement. "I'm hungry, Lily," Noah muttered, his voice as low as the growling coming from his stomach. "I know, Noah. Let's see if Mr. Gordon has any leftover bread tonight," Lily replied, her big brown eyes fixed on the bakery ahead. That's when little Noah, with the sharp look only children have for unexpected details, spotted the wallet. "Look over there, Lily," he exclaimed, pointing with his index finger. Lily followed her brother's pointing finger, and her eyes widened at the sight of the black object on the sidewalk. Carefully, she approached and knelt, still holding Noah's hand. "What's that?" Noah asked, leaning in for a better look. "It's a wallet," Lily answered, picking it up carefully. Someone must have lost it. She opened the gold clasp with fingers trembling from cold and hunger. Her eyes grew even larger when she saw the contents. Inside there was more money than she had ever seen in her life. $100 bills perfectly arranged, black and gold credit cards that looked important, and documents bearing the name James Morgan. Noah's stomach growled again, louder this time. Lily looked at her brother, then at the bakery, and then back at the wallet in her hands. A silent battle raged within her. The money was more than enough to feed them for weeks, maybe months. They could buy food, shoes, maybe even a new blanket. Let's take it to Mr. Gordon, she finally decided, closing the wallet. It's not ours. But then Noah doubled over, clutching his stomach with a low groan of pain. Lily felt her heart tighten. Her little brother had eaten nothing since the previous morning, when they shared a sandwich found near a diner. Just a minute, Noah, she said, opening the wallet again. With hesitant fingers, she pulled out a single $20 bill. It was the smallest denomination there. Her small fingers trembled not just from the cold, but from fear and guilt over taking something that didn't belong to her. We'll buy bread, then return the wallet, she told Noah, who only nodded, eyes fixed on the promise of food. Lily looked around, searching for paper. She found a crumpled piece of notebook page in the pocket of the old, oversized coat she wore. It was part of a homework sheet she'd fished out of a school's trash can, trying to practice writing during the few months she'd attended classes. Using a chewed pencil she always carried with her, she wrote carefully, her tongue sticking out slightly as she focused on forming each letter as neatly as she could. I'm sorry. My brother is hungry, so I took just one bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back. She reread the note 3 times, making sure it was clear. She folded the paper and placed it inside the wallet, right on top of the remaining bills. Come on, Noah, she said, taking his hand again. We'll buy bread and then give this to Mr. Gordon. The children walked into the bakery, the bell announcing their arrival. Gordon, who was closing up, looked up and smiled at the 2 little visitors he knew well. Lily, Noah, I was saving some bread for you, he said, taking a bag from behind the counter. Lily approached, holding the wallet tightly in one hand and the $20 bill in the other. Mr. Gordon, we found this outside, she said, extending the wallet. It's got a lot of money inside. Gordon took the wallet in surprise, opening it and immediately seeing the note atop the bills. I took this bill to buy bread for Noah, Lily continued, showing the $20 with trembling fingers. He's really hungry. I promise I'll pay you back when I can. Gordon took the bill, looking from the wallet to Lily's sincere eyes, then to little Noah, who was trembling beside his sister. Gordon's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. Do you know who this wallet belongs to? He asked gently. Lily shook her head. It has the name James Morgan on the cards, but I don't know anyone by that name. Gordon nodded, instantly recognizing the name of one of the wealthiest men in the city. He had been surprised to see him in his modest bakery earlier, more surprised still by the honesty of these children who, even in hunger, decided to return a fortune. I'll keep the wallet and give it to him if he comes back, Gordon said. As for the bread, you don't have to pay me, Lily. Take these. They're still warm. He handed over the bag he had already prepared, containing 2 loaves of bread and some cookies, but Lily shook her head, extending the bill again. I want to pay this time Mr. Gordon. That way I don't owe anything. The pride in her voice, and even from someone so small and hungry, was unmistakable. Gordon accepted the money with a lump in his throat, returning Lily's change, which she carefully slipped into her pocket. To pay you back later, she explained. Noah was already biting into a piece of bread, his eyes closed in pure happiness as he slowly chewed, savoring every bite. Where will you sleep tonight? Gordon asked, worried about the cold outside. Same place as last night, Lily answered vaguely. We have a blanket. Before Gordon could insist, Lily took Noah's hand again, thanked him, and left the bakery clutching the bread bag to her chest. The bell jingled softly as they left. Gordon stood there, the heavy wallet in his hands, and an even heavier feeling in his heart. He had known these children for a few months. They showed up from time to time, always at the end of the day hoping for leftovers. He never knew where they lived or why they were alone. He placed the wallet in a safe spot under the counter. If James Morgan didn't come back for it, he would find a way to contact him. And when he did, Gordon was certain the billionaire needed to know about little Lily and her extraordinary honesty. Outside, Lily and Noah walked along the dark streets, sharing the warm bread and shielding themselves from the cold wind. Even with hunger and cold, Lily felt a strange peace. She had done the right thing, as her mother had taught her before leaving. "It's good, isn't it, Noah?" she asked, watching her brother savor the food. "Best bread in the world," he replied, mouth full, a rare smile lighting his thin little face. Lily smiled too, putting her arm around her brother's shoulders as they walked. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for today, Noah wouldn't go to sleep hungry. James only realized he'd lost his wallet when he arrived at his apartment. The sense of freedom he'd felt walking anonymously through New York streets evaporated instantly, replaced by a wave of anxiety. It wasn't about the money, it meant little to him, but about the documents and cards that would need cancelling and replacing. Another complication in his already chaotic life. Immediately, he mentally retraced his steps. The last time he remembered using the wallet was at the bakery. He must have put it back poorly in his jacket pocket. He glanced at the clock, nearly 11 p.m. The bakery would definitely be closed by then. After a restless night, James awoke before his alarm. He ignored the dozens of messages from Helen about the charity cocktail he had ditched, waved off the idea of a fancy breakfast, and hurried out, driving himself, a rare occurrence. He had no patience to wait for the driver that morning. He arrived at the bakery at 7:15 a.m. just after it opened. The bell chimed as he entered, exactly as it had the night before. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. There were more customers now, regular people in their morning routine, grabbing coffee and pastries before work. Some looked at James, noticing how out of place he seemed. His $5,000 Italian suit clashed with the simple surroundings. Gordon was behind the counter, arranging bread in the display. He looked up at the sound of the bell and immediately recognized James. A smile formed on his face. "Mr. Morgan, I was expecting you to come back," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. James frowned, surprised to be addressed by name. He didn't remember introducing himself. "You know who I am?" Gordon nodded. "Your name is on the documents in your wallet. And, well, your picture appears in the papers occasionally." "So you found it," James said, feeling relieved. "I lost it here last night." "Actually, I wasn't the one who found it," Gordon replied, leaning down to grab something from under the counter, "but rather the person who brought it to me." Gordon placed the black leather wallet on the counter. James picked it up, opening it to check its contents. All his cards and documents seemed to be in place. He noticed, however, that a $20 bill was missing and there was a folded piece of paper inside that hadn't been there before. "What's this?" he asked, taking the note. Gordon smiled, a smile mixed with an expression James couldn't immediately decipher. It was part sadness, part admiration. "I suggest you read it," the baker simply said. James unfolded the paper. It was a crumpled sheet of notebook paper with words written in a child's handwriting, obviously with great effort. "I'm sorry. My brother is hungry, so I took just one bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back." James stared at the note for a long moment, rereading it several times. Something strange happened in his chest, a sensation of tightness, followed by a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. "Who wrote this?" he finally asked, his voice softer than he intended. "Lily," Gordon replied. "A little girl, 5 years old. She and her younger brother, Noah, found your wallet on the sidewalk last night." Gordon then recounted what had happened, how Lily came in holding the wallet and her brother's hand, how she confessed to taking a single bill, even though the wallet contained thousands of dollars, how she insisted on paying for the bread when he offered it for free. "They were hungry, Mr. Morgan, the kind of hunger that leaves marks." The boy could barely stand. Even so, she insisted on returning the wallet with all the rest of the money and left a note apologizing for taking only what was necessary to feed her brother. James felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine emotion. The story of that child, a 5-year-old girl with more integrity than most adults he knew, touched something dormant inside him. Where do they live? Who are their parents? He asked, feeling an inexplicable urgency. Gordon shook his head. I'm not entirely sure. They come by occasionally, usually near closing time. From what I gather, they're on their own. I've never seen an adult with them. They both look, well, they look homeless, Mr. Morgan. The idea of children so young living on the streets hit James like a punch to the gut. He, who had grown up in mansions and attended the best schools, who had never known a day of need in his entire life, felt ashamed. Ashamed of his indifference and of his empty penthouse, of his luxury cars parked in the garage. I need to find them, he said, his voice firm with a determination that surprised even himself. I want to thank them and help somehow. They usually show up at night, Gordon informed him, but not on specific days. Sometimes they disappear for a week or more. James nodded, making an impulsive decision. I'll look for them. Do you have any idea where to start? Gordon scratched his chin, thinking, they always come from the east side. One time they mentioned something about a shelter on 14th Street, but they said they didn't like it because people tried to separate them. James carefully placed the note back in the wallet. He took out all the bills he had, several $1,000s, and laid them on the counter. For when they come back, food, clothes, whatever they need. Gordon looked at the money, hesitant. Mr. Morgan, this is a lot. It's nothing, James interrupted. And please, call me James. I'll leave my private number. If they show up, let me know right away. After giving Gordon his contact information, James left the bakery, determined. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a mission, something important to do beyond managing his wealth and attending empty social events. Over the next 3 days, James cancelled meetings, ignored business calls, and devoted his time to wandering the streets of the East Village, asking about 2 children named Lily and Noah. He visited shelters, questioned shopkeepers, and showed a police-style sketch he had commissioned based on Gordon's description. On one of those searches, he ended up in an area he would normally avoid, a space under a bridge where several homeless individuals had set up a small camp. The contrast between this world and his own was striking. People wrapped in thin blankets, their few belongings in plastic bags, faces marked by stories James could not imagine. An elderly lady, wearing multiple coats despite the day not being so cold, looked at him curiously. I'm looking for 2 kids, James explained, showing the sketch. Lily and Noah. Lily is 5. Noah is 3. The woman studied the drawing for a moment, then nodded slowly. Those siblings, she said in a raspy voice. They come around sometimes. The girl cares for the little one like she's his mother. James's heart quickened. When was the last time you saw them? A couple of days ago. They don't stay long around here. The girl is afraid that social services will take them. Do you know where they might go? The woman pointed vaguely west. There's an abandoned building a few blocks from here. Many of us go there when it rains or snows. Maybe they're there. James thanked her, leaving a few $100 bills that the woman initially refused but ultimately accepted with trembling hands. As he walked toward the building she mentioned, James viewed the city with new eyes. He had always seen New York from the top of his skyscraper or through tinted car windows. Now he saw the streets as they really were, not just the stylish store windows and exclusive restaurants, but also the dark alleys, people sleeping on sidewalks, and the vacant looks of those society had forgotten. How could he have lived so many years in this city without truly seeing it? The answer was simple and painful. He had chosen not to see. It was easier, more comfortable, to live in his bubble of privilege. The abandoned building had broken windows and an entrance partially boarded up. James hesitated only for a moment before squeezing through the gap between the boards. The interior smelled of mold and dampness. There were signs of occupancy, old blankets, food wrappers, a half-melted candle. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing through the peeling walls. "Lily, Noah?" No response, only the distant sound of traffic outside. James climbed the stairs, checking each empty room. On the 3rd floor, he found a space that seemed organized like a makeshift home. A worn-out mattress on the floor, a few clothes folded carefully, children's drawings taped to the wall with duct tape. He approached the drawings, simple stick figures of two children holding hands. In one, there was a larger figure, possibly a woman with wings, floating above the children. A deceased mother, maybe. James felt a pang of sadness. Although he didn't find the children, James knew he was on the right track. He returned to the building over the next 2 days, leaving non-perishable food, water bottles, a new warm blanket, and more drawings. He also left a simple note. "Lily and Noah, my name is James. I found your note in my wallet. Thank you for your honesty. I'd like to meet you and help. I'll be at Mr. Gordon's bakery every night at 6 p.m. On the 5th day of his search, James was at Gordon's bakery, drinking coffee and waiting patiently. Helen, his assistant, called incessantly about contracts that needed his review and crucial meetings he'd missed. For the first time, none of it felt important. Gordon approached, refilling his cup. "You know, James, in 30 years of serving people in this bakery, I've never seen anyone change so much in such a short time," he remarked. James looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "When you first walked in here, you seemed, distant, like you were walking through a dream that wasn't yours. Now you seem more present." James reflected on those words. They were true. Since he began searching for Lily and Noah, he felt different, more alive, more connected to the world around him. "These days, looking for those kids have made me see things that were always in front of me, but I chose to ignore," he admitted. Gordon nodded understandingly. "Sometimes we need someone or something to wake us up." "A note written by a 5-year-old girl with more character than most adults I know," James said, smiling slightly. The doorbell chimed, prompting both men to look toward the entrance. It was only a regular customer whom Gordon greeted by name. James sighed, glancing at his watch. It was nearly 8 p.m., and there was still no sign of the children. Even so, he didn't feel discouraged, only more determined. Tomorrow, he would search again, and then the day after, for however long it took. "They'll show up," Gordon said, as though reading his thoughts. "Be patient," James nodded, savoring the last sip of coffee. The search for Lily and Noah had become more than just a mission. It was the purpose his life had been missing. And for the first time in a long while, James Morgan felt hope. Not just about finding the children, but about finding something of value in himself as well. 10 days had passed since James began his search for Lily and Noah. 10 days of fruitless efforts, raised hopes, and subsequent disappointments. 10 days of waiting in Gordon's bakery that always ended the same way, with nothing. The children had vanished like little ghosts in the vastness of the city. That night, James finally gave in to Helen's insistent pleas and attended a charity event at the Metropolitan Museum. Dressed in his tuxedo, among people discussing their $1 million donations while sipping $200 glasses of champagne, he felt more out of place than ever. Every conversation seemed superficial, every smile forced. His mind constantly wandered to 2 small faces he knew only from descriptions and a rough sketch. As soon as he could, he slipped away. It was nearly 11 p.m. when his driver dropped him off a few blocks from his apartment. James dismissed the car, saying he would walk the rest of the way. He needed to think, to breathe. A light rain began to fall, but he didn't mind. The streets were almost deserted at that hour, with only a few passing taxis and late-night wanderers in a hurry. It was then that, as he passed a side street, something caught his eye. Under the awning of a closed shop, partially hidden by shadows, there were 2 small, hunched figures. James would likely have walked right by them weeks ago, but his eyes were now trained to look for exactly this. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle whoever it was. The dim glow of a nearby neon sign briefly illuminated their faces, a girl protectively holding a smaller boy. James's heart raced. Could it be? The boy coughed, a harsh and painful sound, and the girl hugged him tighter, trying to warm him with her small body. He shivered visibly, even in the faint light. "Lily?" James called softly, stopping at a safe distance. The girl lifted her head abruptly, eyes wide with fear. She pulled the boy closer as though preparing to run. The weak light revealed her thin face and wary eyes. "Who are you?" she asked with a voice that tried to sound strong despite her evident fear. James stepped a bit closer, keeping his hands visible in what he hoped was a reassuring gesture. My name is James Morgan. I've been looking for you and Noah for several days." At the sound of his name, Lily tensed up even more. Her eyes narrowed as she assessed James from head to toe, the elegant tuxedo, expensive shoes, and the look of someone who never had to worry about food or shelter. "How do you know our names?" she asked, mistrust clear in each syllable. James crouched down slowly to be at her eye level, maintaining a respectful distance. "You found my wallet almost 2 weeks ago. You left a note in it, remember? Mr. Gordon at the bakery gave it to me." Lily's eyes widened in recognition, followed by an even stronger flash of fear. Her small hand squeezed Noah's more tightly. I was going to pay the money back," she said quickly, voice trembling. "I promised in the note. I just needed time to—" Noah coughed again, a sound that seemed to tear through his small chest. He was pale, his lips slightly blue. James felt a knot in his chest at the boy's condition. "Lily, listen," he said as gently as he could. "I'm not here to collect anything. I came to thank you and to help." The girl looked at him doubtfully. "Don't worry about paying back the bread money," James continued, recalling the exact words he'd planned to say if he found her. "What you did was very noble, Lily." She blinked, clearly confused. You're not mad I took your money?" "Mad?" James shook his head, smiling slightly. "Quite the opposite. I was moved by your honesty. You could have kept the entire wallet, all the money, but you only took what was needed to feed your brother, and you still left a note promising to pay it back." Lily seemed unable to believe what she was hearing. No one had ever praised her honesty before. In fact, living on the street, people often called her foolish for not taking advantage of opportunities. Noah shook violently, letting out a low moan, leaning more heavily against his sister. James noticed how difficult and noisy the boy's breathing had become. "Your brother needs a doctor, Lily," he said urgently but still calmly. Fear immediately returned to the girl's eyes. "We can't go to a hospital. They'll call social services. They'll separate us." "I know a private clinic where that won't happen," James assured her. "I can take you right now, no questions, no social services." "I promise." Lily hesitated, looking at her brother with concern. Noah was clearly getting worse by the minute, his forehead hot against her neck, contrasting with his ice-cold hands. "Lily," James called softly, "I know you have no reason to trust me, but your brother needs help, please." A long moment passed as Lily looked from Noah to James and back again. Finally, she nodded almost imperceptibly. "If you try to separate us, we'll run away," she warned, her chin lifted defiantly despite her fear. "Understood," James agreed, relieved she had accepted. He moved closer slowly and, with Lily's silent permission, took Noah into his arms. The boy was lighter than he should be for his age, his frail body shivering with fever. James removed his tuxedo jacket and wrapped the child in it. "I'll get a cab," he said, looking at Lily, who stood up and stayed by his side, watchful. "There's a clinic about 10 minutes away." Minutes later, they were in a taxi, Lily sitting stiffly at the edge of the seat, ready to jump if necessary, while James held Noah against his chest, trying to warm the boy, whose breathing was noticeably labored. The driver looked in the rearview mirror a few times, clearly curious about a man in a tuxedo holding a sick, poorly dressed child, accompanied by a similarly unkempt little girl. But something in James's serious expression stopped him from asking any questions. At the private clinic, the doors opened immediately. A single call from James during the ride ensured a doctor would be waiting, despite the late hour. Lily stuck close to James as they took Noah into an examination room, her vigilant eyes watching every move made by the medical staff. Dr. Patterson, a middle-aged man with kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, examined Noah carefully. Lily refused to leave her brother's side, even when the nurses suggested she wait outside. James respected her decision, staying a few steps behind to give them space. Early pneumonia was the doctor's diagnosis after listening to Noah's breathing and checking x-rays. "We caught it in time, but it could have gotten much worse quickly if you had waited. He'll need antibiotics, nebulizer treatments, and plenty of rest." "He's going to be okay?" Lily asked, her voice small and scared. Dr. Patterson smiled gently at her. "He will, sweetheart. Kids are surprisingly resilient. but he needs a few days of proper care. While Noah received his first dose of medication and went through his first nebulizer session, Lily finally allowed a nurse to examine her own scratches and bruises, more at James's insistence than by her own choice. "What now?" she asked once all the procedures were done, Noah sleeping peacefully under the medication's effects. The question was simple but laden with anxiety. James knew what that question really meant. Where would they go? Back to the streets? Some shelter where they might be separated? "I have a big apartment with several empty rooms," he said, choosing his words carefully. "You can stay there while Noah recovers. You'll have a safe room, hot meals, a bath. No commitments, no questions you don't want to answer." Lily studied him for a long moment. "Why? Why are you doing this for us?" It was a simple question, but James realized there was no simple answer. Why was he doing all this? Out of guilt for his privilege, out of loneliness, a desire for redemption. "Because your note reminded me of something I'd forgotten," he finally said. "That there are still people with integrity in this world, and that maybe I can do something more meaningful with what I have than just accumulate more." The answer seemed to satisfy Lily, or at least she was too tired to question further. When Noah was discharged with prescriptions and care instructions, she allowed James to drive them to his apartment. In the luxurious private elevator that went straight to the penthouse, Lily was wide-eyed, despite trying to hide it. Noah, half asleep in James's arms, blinked a little when they arrived at the brightly lit apartment, but quickly closed his eyes again, exhausted. "Hey, you can stay in this room," James said, leading them into one of the guest bedrooms. It had a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, a flat-screen TV on the wall, and a stunning view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Lily seemed utterly out of place in that setting. Her bare, dirty feet on the immaculate carpet, her torn dress in stark contrast to the opulence around her. James could see how uncomfortable she felt. "The bathroom is over there," he said, trying to sound natural. "There are clean towels, robes, everything you need. I'll make something light for you to eat." He laid Noah on the huge bed, looking even smaller among the white sheets, and left to give Lily some privacy. In the kitchen, as he prepared a simple soup, one of the few things he knew how to make, James reflected on how unexpectedly his life had turned. 2 weeks ago, he'd felt empty, bored, disconnected from everything and everyone. Now 2 unknown children were in his apartment, and for the first time in years, he felt genuinely needed. When he returned to the room with a tray, he found Lily sitting rigidly on the edge of the bed, having just wiped Noah's face with a damp towel and combed his hair with her fingers. The boy slept soundly, his breathing still somewhat labored but much better than before. "I brought soup and some sandwiches," James said, placing the tray on a side table. "Nothing too heavy, but it'll help you regain your strength." Lily looked at the food, then at James. "Thank you," she finally whispered, almost inaudible. He nodded, sitting in a nearby armchair, keeping some distance so she wouldn't feel intimidated. "You must be tired. Eat something and then get some rest. We can talk more in the morning." Lily ate slowly, as if savoring every spoonful. Occasionally, her eyes flicked to Noah, checking on him even in his sleep. Then, reluctantly, she lay down beside her brother, though James could tell she didn't plan to sleep. She would stand guard, protecting Noah. "Good night, Lily," he said, heading to the door. "If you need anything, I'll be in the living room." "Mr. Morgan," she called out, just as he was about to leave. James turned around. "You really don't want the money back?" He smiled slightly. "I really don't, and please, call me James." Over the next 2 nights, a routine naturally fell into place. Noah took his medicine, did his nebulizer sessions, and slowly regained strength, though he still had bouts of coughing and occasional fever. Lily, as his constant guardian, administered the meds under James's supervision, bathed her brother, and told him stories at bedtime, made up tales of magical places where there was never a shortage of food, and no one had to be afraid. On the 3rd day, while James was working on his laptop in the living room, and Noah watched cartoons in the bedroom, Lily appeared silently at his side. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, her small voice but with determined resolve. James immediately closed the laptop. Of course. Want to sit down? She nodded, climbing awkwardly onto the oversized chair. Her legs dangled, not reaching the floor. You've been really nice to us, she began, looking at her own hands. No one has cared this much since our mom died. James felt a pang. I'm sorry about your mother, Lily. She nodded, biting her lower lip. It was a year ago. She got really sick. Like Noah, but worse. We had no money for doctors. And your dad? James asked gently. Lily's face hardened. He left. Before Mom got sick, he just disappeared one day. Never said anything. Never explained. Just left. James felt a wave of anger at this unknown man who had abandoned his family, leaving a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old behind. After Mom died, a neighbor took care of us for a while, but she had too many problems, couldn't keep us. Then government people came, wanting to take us. Social services, James clarified. Lily nodded solemnly. They were going to separate us. They said nobody adopts 2 kids at once, that it'd be easier to find a family just for Noah because he's younger. So you ran away with him, James said softly. I couldn't let them take my brother, she said, surprisingly firm for someone so small. I promised Mom I'd always take care of him. James looked at this extraordinary girl, only 5, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. What would he have done at that age under such adversity? Certainly not shown a fraction of her courage and determination. You're very brave, Lily, he said sincerely, and you've done an amazing job taking care of your brother. She blushed a little, unused to compliments. Thank you for helping us. Noah's feeling much better now. I'm glad to hear it, James said, smiling. Lily fiddled with the hem of the new t-shirt James had bought her, simple but clean and tear-free. Are you going to call social services when Noah's better? The question hit James like a punch. It was obvious she'd been carrying that fear all along, despite his efforts to reassure her. Not if you don't want me to, he answered carefully. She looked up, hopeful but cautious. Really? Really, he confirmed. But Lily, you can't keep living on the streets. It's not safe or healthy. What happened to Noah proves that. She dropped her gaze again. I know, but I don't know what to do. We don't have anywhere to go. James took a deep breath. The idea that had been forming in his mind over the past days solidified. What if you stayed here with me? Lily looked at him suspiciously, as if expecting a trick. For how long? For as long as you need, James replied. I've got plenty of space, as you can see. And, to be honest, this place never really felt like a home until you two arrived. It was true, he realized with some surprise. In just 3 days, the children's presence had transformed his sterile, impersonal apartment into something closer to a home. Their little shoes in the hallway, Noah's drawings scattered on the coffee table, even the toys he'd bought them the day before. All of it brought life to what once felt like just a luxury showroom. Lily thought for a long moment. I don't want to be a burden, she finally said. James smiled, touched by her concern. You and Noah aren't a burden, Lily. He hesitated, startled by the intensity of his own feelings. You brought me something I needed without even knowing it. What? She asked, curious. Purpose, he answered simply. A reason to wake up, besides earning more money, I don't know what to do with. Lily processed that slowly, her serious little face weighing the implications. Can I think about it? She finally asked. James nodded, respecting her caution. Of course, there's no rush. And whatever you decide, I promise to help you both as best I can. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, James stood on his penthouse balcony, looking out at the city lights. He thought about his life before, the emptiness, the monotony, the loneliness masked by success, and then about how everything had changed since he found a simple note written by a child. In just 2 weeks, he'd discovered things in himself he never knew he possessed. Patience to care for a sick boy, understanding to deal with a traumatized girl's justified fears, and above all, a genuine affection that grew each day for these 2 children who had recently been complete strangers. James smiled at the starry night, feeling a certainty he hadn't experienced in a long time. Whatever came next, his life would never be the same. And, he realized with surprise, that was exactly what he wanted. 3 weeks had passed since James brought Lily and Noah to his apartment. 3 weeks of profound changes, not just in the physical environment, now filled with toys, children's books, and colorful drawings on walls that had once been immaculate white, but especially in James himself. For the first time in his adult life, his routine no longer revolved around corporate meetings and business dinners. Now there were meal times, bedtime reading sessions, and spontaneous laughter whenever Noah said something unexpectedly funny or Lily displayed her precocious wisdom. That morning, while making breakfast, another novelty, since he used to rely entirely on a housekeeper, James watched the children sitting at the kitchen counter. Noah, fully recovered from pneumonia, was happily munching on toast with jam, while Lily flipped through a science book James had bought for her after discovering her fascination with marine animals. "Did you know that blue whales have hearts the size of a small car?" Lily asked without looking up from the book. "No, I didn't," James replied, smiling as he poured orange juice into the small cups he'd bought especially for them. "That's amazing. And they can live up to 100 years, she continued. "Imagine what they must see in the depths of the ocean." Noah stopped chewing, his eyes wide with wonder. 100 years? "That's older than you, James." James laughed, sitting down with them. "Much older. I'm only 30, Noah." "That's a lot," the boy declared solemnly, making James laugh even harder. These simple moments had become precious to him. But along with the joy, a concern was growing: the legal status of this arrangement. He was housing 2 children without any documentation or authorization. If the authorities found out, Lily and Noah could be taken away, precisely the thing the girl feared most. After breakfast, while the children watched an educational show Lily selected, "So Noah can learn," James retreated to his office and made a call he'd been putting off. "Mr. Harmon, it's James Morgan. I need your advice on a delicate matter." Robert Harmon had been the Morgan family lawyer for decades, a discreet and efficient man who'd rescued James from complicated situations a few times. "I'm currently taking care of 2 orphaned children," James explained, choosing his words carefully. "Their mother passed away and their father abandoned them. I want to know my legal options to keep caring for them without them being taken by the social services system." There was a long silence on the other end. "Mr. Morgan, are you telling me you have 2 children living in your home with no legal custody?" Harmon's voice sounded concerned. "Exactly. That's complicated. Technically, what you're doing could be considered kidnapping or at least a violation of child protection laws." James felt a chill up his spine. "I didn't kidnap anyone, Robert. I found these kids living on the streets, practically starving and sick. I'm giving them a safe home, food, medical care. I understand your intentions, but the law doesn't work on intentions alone," the lawyer explained patiently. "I need you to give me more details so we can figure out the best course of action." After explaining the full situation, carefully omitting the wallet episode to protect Lily, James listened attentively as Harmon laid out his options. "The safest route would be to notify social services immediately," the lawyer concluded. "They'd do an assessment and possibly place the children in a temporary shelter while investigating." "No," James cut him off firmly. "Lily's terrified of shelters. They'd try to separate them. I can't do that to them." "Then the second option is to file for temporary guardianship while we look for information about the father. If he truly abandoned them, his parental rights can be revoked, paving the way for a possible adoption." James felt his heart race at the mention of adoption, something he'd never considered for himself, but which now felt strangely right. How long would that process take? Usually months, but given your resources and connections, Harmon let the sentence trail off. "I don't want to use influence to skip steps," James said. "I want to do this the right way, but I also don't want the children taken away while the process is ongoing. I understand. I can reach out to some contacts in social services to work discreetly without removing the children while you demonstrate you're a suitable guardian. But I warn you, it'll be an invasive process. They'll investigate your past, your finances, your lifestyle. You need to be prepared." "I am," James replied without hesitation. After hanging up, he sat for a few minutes, processing the conversation. He needed to talk to Lily about this, but how to explain complex legal procedures to a 5-year-old whose only encounter with authorities had led to trauma? James found his opportunity that night after Noah had fallen asleep. Lily, as usual, was beside her brother, keeping watch even though it was no longer necessary. "Lily," James called softly from the door. "Can we talk for a bit in the living room?" Something in his tone must have alerted the girl because she immediately tensed. Still, she followed him to the sofa, sitting with her back straight and her eyes focused, the posture of someone always ready to react to a threat. "We need to talk about something important," James began, sitting a short distance away to make her comfortable. "About your future." Lily's eyes widened in alarm. "Are you sending us away?" "No," James quickly reassured her. "Not at all. In fact, it's the opposite. I want to make sure you can stay here safely, without worrying you'll be taken away." She relaxed slightly but stayed vigilant. "How?" "There's a system, Lily, for taking care of children who don't have present parents. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. In your case, when you and Noah ran away, they were going to separate us," she interrupted, her voice low but firm. "They said it'd be easier to find a family for Noah alone than for both of us together." James nodded sympathetically. "You were very brave protecting your brother, but now we're in a tricky position. Legally, I have no right to take care of you without official permission." Fear returned to Lily's eyes. "They're going to take us." "Not if I can help it," James assured. "I spoke with a lawyer today. He explained I can apply to become your legal guardian. That means I'd have official permission to take care of you, make sure you go to school, take you to the doctor, is all that." "But what if they don't let you? What if they decide it's better for us to go to a shelter?" Lily's voice trembled slightly. James scooted closer, hesitating before placing his hand over Lily's small one. "I'll do everything in my power to stop that. The lawyer said we can do it in a way that lets you both stay here during the whole process." Lily was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. "My dad, what if he comes back?" The question caught James off guard. He hadn't considered the possibility of the father who abandoned them suddenly returning. "If he does come back," James said slowly, "the situation would be reassessed, but he'd have to prove he's capable of caring for you. And after leaving you both like he did, he might not have left us on purpose," Lily defended, surprising James. Despite everything, there was still a residual loyalty there. "Maybe something happened to him too." James nodded. "You're right. We don't know for sure. Part of the process will be trying to find him and figure out what happened." Seeing the conflict on her face, James felt the need to reassure her. "Lily, my only goal is to make sure you and Noah are safe and happy. I promise I won't do anything that separates you two. We're in this together now, okay?" She studied him for a long moment, as though trying to read his soul. "Do you promise you won't leave us like Dad did?" The question struck James deeply. "I promise, Lily. I'm here to stay, to take care of you." For the first time since they met, Lily initiated physical contact, extending her pinky finger. "Pinky promise," James smiled, intertwining his little finger with hers. "Pinky promise." The next morning, James called a meeting with his top executives and partners. Word had spread that he'd practically withdrawn from the business in recent weeks to care for 2 street kids, as someone crudely put it, causing worry and disapproval. "James Key, we understand your philanthropic impulse," began Richard Barnes, one of the oldest partners. "But there are proper ways to help. Donations to charity, setting up foundations. Getting personally involved like this is inappropriate," James completed, his tone calm but firm. "Risky for the company's reputation." "Frankly, yes," Barnes replied without mincing words. "You're the face of Morgan Enterprises. Your personal actions directly affect the company." "And adopting 2 needy children would hurt our image?" James asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's not that simple," Helen, his longtime assistant, intervened. "There are legal issues involved. Rumors that you're housing children without proper authorization could be disastrous. That's why I've started the guardianship process, James explained. I'm following the proper legal steps. Even so, another executive insisted, the board is worried about your sudden change of focus. The company needs your full attention. James looked around the table at the faces of people he'd worked with for years, some of whom he considered almost friends. He saw genuine concern in some, cold calculation in others. Let me be clear, he said, leaning forward. My decision about Lily and Noah is not up for debate. They will stay with me. What we can discuss is how to reorganize my responsibilities so I can take care of them and the company. The tense silence that followed was palpable. Finally, Helen sighed. You've always been stubborn, James. If that's your final decision, we'll find a way to make it work for everyone involved. In the following days, James found himself juggling meetings with social workers, discreetly assessing his capacity as a guardian, legal consultations about the guardianship process, and the daily care of the children. To his surprise, Noah adapted impressively quickly. The boy, once shy and fearful, now ran around the apartment with boundless energy, asked endless questions, and followed James like a little enthusiastic shadow. James, look, Noah exclaimed one afternoon, showing him a colorful drawing. I drew us, you, me, Lily, and Rex. Rex was the stuffed dinosaur James had bought for him, now the boy's inseparable companion. That's amazing, Noah, James praised, genuinely impressed by the details for a 3-year-old. Let's hang it on the fridge. Lily watched these interactions with a mix of relief and caution. James noticed how she relaxed a bit more each day as she saw her brother happy, but she still maintained that constant vigilance, as though expecting it all to fall apart at any moment. One evening, while James read a bedtime story to Noah, who insisted on hearing the same dinosaur book for the 10th time in a row, he noticed Lily at the doorway, watching them with a thoughtful expression. Later, when Noah finally dozed off, she approached James in the hallway. James, she whispered, are you really going to try to keep us? Be our real guardian. Yes, Lily, he replied with all the sincerity he could muster. I've already filed the papers. I have a hearing with the judge in a few weeks. She nodded, absorbing the news. And what if the judge says no? James knelt to her eye level. Then we'll appeal and try again. I won't give up, Lily. The girl studied his face for a moment before asking the question clearly tormenting her. Why? Why are you doing all this for us? It was a question James had been asking himself too. Why had he become so attached to these kids in such a short time? Why was he willing to face courts, the opinions of his peers, and a complete reorganization of his life for them? Because you showed me what really matters, he answered honestly. Before I met you, I had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. Like what? Lily asked, genuinely curious. Like purpose, connection. The chance to truly make a difference in someone's life, James explained. You gave me that, Lily, and I want to give you and Noah the stability and love you deserve. Something shifted in Lily's gaze then, a small barrier falling, a glimmer of hope she rarely allowed herself. Without a word, she extended her arms in a hesitant gesture. Surprised and deeply moved, James hugged her gently. It was the first hug she'd initiated, a small miracle of trust. In that moment, as he held that extraordinary child in his arms, James knew with absolute certainty he would fight the whole world if necessary to keep Lily and Noah safe. The decision he'd made was not just serious, it was the most important commitment of his life. Detective Frank Reynolds' office was exactly as James imagined, small, slightly chaotic, with files stacked on various surfaces and a persistent smell of strong coffee. Reynolds' cars, a short, solid man with graying hair and sharp eyes, flipped through the documents he'd just printed. I've found some information about the children's father, he said, pushing a folder toward James. Matthew Miller, 32 years old, worked as a mechanic until about 2 years ago. James opened the folder with a racing heart. Over the last few weeks, as the guardianship process advanced, he'd hired Reynolds to investigate the whereabouts of Lily and Noah's father. Social services were also looking, but James wanted to be prepared, to know exactly what he was dealing with. He has a criminal record, Reynolds went on, pointing to the documents. He was arrested for involvement in a robbery about a year and 8 months ago. Sentenced to 2 years? James looked up, surprised. So that means... He might have been released recently or is about to be, Reynolds finished. The prison system often releases inmates with good behavior before they serve the full term. A chill ran through James. Does he know where the kids are? Reynolds shook his head. From what I gathered, no. When he was incarcerated, his wife, Clara Miller, was still alive. She passed away 8 months later from untreated pneumonia. The children probably stayed with neighbors or acquaintances before ending up on the streets, but there are no official records. The system lost track of them. James examined the photo attached to the file. A man with a hardened expression, dark hair, and Lily's eye shape. It was strange finally seeing the face of the father to the children who were now part of his life. There's one more thing, Reynolds added, hesitating. He had no prior criminal history. From what I learned talking to former co-workers, Miller was considered a devoted, hard-working father. The crime seems to have been a desperate act after he lost his job and accumulated medical bills for his wife, who was already ill. James felt a knot in his stomach. This information complicated everything. It would be easier if Matthew Miller was simply an unworthy criminal, but now there were nuances he couldn't ignore. Did he try to find the kids when he got arrested? James asked, dreading the answer. Prison records show he sent several letters to their last known address, but obviously never got a reply since the wife had died and the kids were no longer there. James put the documents back in the folder, thanked the detective, and left with his mind reeling. In the car, he looked again at Matthew Miller's photo. The man hadn't abandoned his kids on purpose. He'd been separated from them by tragic circumstances. That changed everything. At home, he encountered the scene that had become his new normal. Noah playing on the living room rug with building blocks, Lily drawing at the table, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration, and Mrs. Harris, the housekeeper who now came daily and adored the children. Cooking dinner in the kitchen, James felt a rush of protectiveness seeing that domestic scene. In just 2 months, these kids had become his world. "Jamie," Noah shouted upon seeing him, running with open arms. Jamie was how Noah had started calling him recently, a simpler version of James for his 3-year-old tongue. The nickname stuck, to James's surprise and joy, a man who never had a term of endearment in his life. "Hey, champ," he replied, scooping the boy up and breathing in the smell of children's shampoo in his hair. "Building something cool." "A rocket to go to the moon," Noah answered enthusiastically. "You'll see, it'll be the biggest rocket in the world." James laughed, swaying the boy from side to side before setting him back down. Noah ran off to his blocks, determined to finish his masterpiece. Lily approached more calmly, showing him her drawing, a colorful picture of James holding hands with her and Noah. "It's really great, Lily," he praised sincerely. "You're very talented." A slight blush colored the girl's cheeks. She still wasn't used to praise. "Thanks," she said softly. "Can I put it on the fridge with the others?" "Of course, that's the place of honor." Lily smiled and ran to the kitchen. James watched her, amazed at the gradual transformation he'd witnessed in her. The wary, guarded girl from the early weeks now smiled more often, asked questions, expressed desires. Recently, she had even started attending some trial classes at a nearby private school, while Noah went to a preschool a few mornings a week. But now, with the information about the father, James wondered how long this carefully built happiness would last. After dinner and the nightly routine, bath, teeth brushing, bedtime stories, James found Lily sitting in the small armchair he'd placed in the children's room. She still liked to stay up a bit later than Noah, usually reading or simply watching her brother sleep. "Lily," he called softly from the door, "can we talk in the living room for a moment?" She nodded, following him out. They sat on the sofa, James cautious about how to broach the subject. "Remember I told you about the process to let you stay here officially," he began. Lily nodded, immediately on alert. "Did something bad happen?" No, he assured her quickly. "Actually, we have a date for the hearing. In 3 weeks, a judge will review our case." "Will he let us stay with you?" she asked, hope evident in her voice. "I hope so." But Lily, For the process to be thorough, we need to talk about your parents. James paused, watching her reaction. You told me about your mum, but we haven't really talked about your dad. Lily's face closed off immediately. He left, she said simply, eyes fixed on her own hands. There's nothing to talk about. Actually, Lily, I found some things out that I think you should know, James said carefully. Your dad didn't leave because he wanted to. He had trouble with the law and had to go away. Lily looked up, confused. Trouble with the law? Yes. He did something wrong and had to go to prison. Prison, she whispered the word. Like the bad guys in stories. James's heart tightened. How could he explain to a 5-year-old the complexities of a justice system that often punishes desperation as much as malice? Not everyone who goes to prison is truly a bad guy, Lily. Sometimes they're people who made mistakes, who took the wrong actions in desperate times. Lily processed this in silence, her brow furrowed as she concentrated. So he didn't abandon us on purpose. From what I found, no. He tried to keep in touch, but when your mum got sick, everything got complicated. James watched conflicting emotions cross Lily's face. Confusion, anger, a flicker of relief quickly suppressed. Doesn't matter, she finally said, voice hardening. He should have stayed with us. Mum needed him. We needed him. You're right, James agreed. A father should be there for his children. He should have found another way. Lily nodded, her eyes suddenly brimming with tears. Does he know where we are now? No. But James hesitated, needing to be honest. He might be looking for you. And if he finds you as your biological father, he has certain rights. What rights? Lily asked, voice trembling slightly. He could ask you to live with him again. The immediate panic in Lily's eyes was exactly what James feared. No, she exclaimed, louder than she meant to, glancing quickly toward the hallway where Noah slept. Lowering her voice, she continued, I don't want to go. I want to stay here, with you. James felt warmth spread in his chest despite the difficult situation. I want you to stay too, Lily. I'll do everything I can to make that happen. Promise? I promise. Lily seemed to relax a bit, though apprehension still shone in her eyes. Jamie, she said softly, using for the first time the nickname Noah had created. What if he shows up looking for us? Hearing her use the nickname nearly broke James. It was the first clear sign Lily considered him part of her family, not just a benefactor or a temporary guardian. Then we'll deal with it together, he replied, striving to keep his voice steady. But for now, we have the hearing coming up, and I'm hopeful. My lawyers think our chances are very good. Lily nodded, appearing a bit more at ease. When James walked her back to the bedroom, she surprised him by asking for a good-night hug, another small miracle in her gradual acceptance of affection. In the weeks that followed, James balanced preparing for the hearing with efforts to keep the children's routine as normal as possible. Lily occasionally asked questions about her father, where he might be if he was looking for them. But mostly, she seemed determined to focus on the present. The household was filled with activity and laughter. Noah went to preschool 3 mornings a week and came back with stories and drawings. Lily progressed quickly in her trial classes, impressing teachers with her sharp intelligence and hunger for knowledge. James, for the first time in his adult life, placed work second. He delegated more responsibilities, refused business trips, and completely rearranged his schedule to be present in the children's daily lives. To his partner's surprise, the company did not collapse. On the contrary, his new perspective on priorities brought a clarity often lacking in his previous decisions. One sunny Sunday afternoon, James took the children to Central Park. Noah ran excitedly after squirrels, while Lily swung slowly, watching other families around her. Jamie, she called suddenly. Are we a family now? The question caught James off guard. What do you think? He replied, sitting on the swing beside her. Lily considered it seriously. I think so. Families live together, take care of each other, and love each other, right? Exactly. Then we're a family, she concluded simply. You, me, and Noah. James felt his eyes grow moist. Yes, Lily. We're a family. The girl smiled, a rare, complete smile that lit her little face. I'm glad we found you. I'm glad you found me too, James replied, with a certainty that came from the depths of his soul. On the night before the hearing, as he tucked Noah into bed, James found Lily still awake, her eyes shining in the dim light of the bedroom. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. She nodded. "What if the judge won't let us stay with you?" "Then we'll keep fighting," he replied firmly. "Like I told you, I won't give up." Lily reached out to hold his hand, a gesture still rare from her. "Thank you, Jamie." That single word, Jamie, meant more to James than all the titles and accolades he'd received in his career. It was a name given with genuine affection, an acknowledgement that he was more than just a rich benefactor or a potential legal guardian. That night, James slept poorly, worried about the hearing, but mostly haunted by the shadow of the biological father looming over their newly formed future. Matthew Miller could show up at any moment, and if he did so before guardianship was official, everything could change drastically. Still, as the sun rose, James felt a renewed determination. The 3-week wait had been filled with small perfect moments, shared meals, children's achievements celebrated, even disagreements about rules and boundaries. Those moments, taken together, formed something too precious to give up without a fight. Whatever the outcome of the hearing or any surprise fate might have in store, James knew his life would never be the same. Lily and Noah had filled a void in him he hadn't known existed, turning his solitary existence into one filled with purpose and love. And for this new world they had created together, he was willing to face any adversity, even if it came in the form of the biological father who, from some unknown place, might be preparing to return to his children's lives. The day before the hearing dawned with a clear sky, a stark contrast to the storm about to break over James's life. He was making breakfast when the phone rang. It was Sarah Daniels, the social worker handling the case. "Mr. Morgan," she said, her professional tone barely hiding an evident concern, "there's been a development we need to discuss urgently. May I come to your apartment in an hour?" James felt a chill up his spine. "Did something happen with tomorrow's hearing?" "I'd rather talk in person. It's complicated." After hanging up, James tried to maintain normalcy as he served pancakes to Lily and Noah. But Lily, with her sharp intuition, immediately sensed something was wrong. "Are you okay, Jamie?" she asked, her dark eyes studying him with an intensity far beyond her 5 years. "Everything's fine," he forced a smile. "Ms. Daniels is coming by to talk about tomorrow." Exactly an hour later, Sarah was sitting in James's living room, a folder in her lap and a grave expression on her face. "Mr. Morgan, Matthew Miller, the biological father of Lily and Noah, has been located." James felt as if the ground disappeared beneath his feet. Despite months of searching for information on the man, the reality of his greatest fear hit him like a punch. "Where is he? What does he want?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "He was released 3 weeks ago after serving 16 months of a 2-year sentence for theft. He's currently in a halfway house for ex-inmates. He reached out to social services to find his children. He knows they're with me." Sarah nodded. "We informed him of the current situation and the ongoing guardianship. He asked to meet them." James stood abruptly, walking to the window. The life he'd built with the children over the last few months suddenly felt fragile, threatened by a shadow from the past. "He has that right?" he finally asked. "Technically, yes, he's the biological father, and his parental rights were never formally terminated. He left his family, but now we know it was because he was incarcerated. So what does he want now?" "He wants to see them. To reconnect." Sarah hesitated. "Given the hearing tomorrow, I suggested a supervised visit here today, if you agree. The judge will have to consider all factors, including how the children react to their father." James fought the urge to refuse. He wanted to protect Lily and Noah, keep them far from this man who, intentionally or not, had caused them so much pain. But he knew delaying the inevitable would only complicate things. "What's he like?" he asked finally. "He seems genuinely remorseful. He completed rehabilitation programs in prison. He's clean, and I saw no sign of aggression. He's also realistic. He knows he's not financially or structurally able to care for the children right now." "Then why complicate things now?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Because they're his children, Mr. Morgan, and From what I understand, he didn't abandon them by choice. Life sometimes puts people in impossible situations. Talking to Lily was the hardest part. Sitting in the corner of the living room he had turned into a little library, James explained as simply as possible that her father wanted to visit them. "He's here, in the city." Lily's eyes were wide. "Yes, he got out of prison recently." "Prison?" The word was a whisper. "Like in the movies." "Something like that," James agreed softly. "Your dad was in trouble with the law. Is that why he disappeared?" Lily's face showed confusion, as if trying to align this new information with the story she'd believed for so long. "Yes, he couldn't stay with you because he was in prison." Lily fell silent, processing, her small fingers twisted in the hem of her shirt, a gesture James recognized as her anxiety. "Do I have to see him?" she finally asked. "Not if you don't want to, Lily. No one is going to force you." She looked toward the hallway where Noah was playing. "What about Noah?" "It's up to him too, but he probably doesn't remember much about your father, does he?" Lily shook her head. "He was too little." After a few minutes of conversation, Lily made her decision with the maturity that always amazed James. "I want to see him. I want to know why he left." At 4 p.m., the doorbell rang. James took a deep breath, adjusting the tie he had decided to wear, symbolic armor. Lily stood beside him, holding his hand tightly, while Noah played on the living room rug, oblivious to the tension in the air. Sarah Daniels stood at the door, accompanied by a medium-height man with slightly stooped shoulders. Matthew Miller looked older than his 32 years, with premature gray at his temples and deep lines around eyes that, James realized with a jolt, were the same as Noah's. "Mr. Morgan," Matthew said, extending a hand hesitantly. "Thank you for letting me visit." James shook his hand briefly, noticing the calluses, signs of manual labor. The man wore simple but clean, well-pressed clothes, and there was a dignity in his voice James hadn't expected. "The kids are in the living room," James replied, leading them through the apartment. Lily had moved closer to her brother, sitting stiffly on the couch, gripping Noah's hand like a lifeline. When Matthew entered, she visibly tensed, but didn't look away. "Lily," Matthew said, his voice choked. "Noah, you've grown so much." The silence that followed hummed with unspoken emotions. It was Noah who finally broke it, in the innocent way only a 3-year-old could. "Who are you?" The simple question hit Matthew like a physical blow. He took a deep breath before answering, "I'm your dad, Noah." The boy's eyes widened. "Like Tommy's dad at my school." "Yes, just like that," Matthew answered with a sad smile. Lily said nothing, studying her father with an intensity that made James feel both proud and pained. Following Sarah's suggestion, they all sat down. James stayed close to the children, ready to intervene if necessary. "I know you must be confused," Matthew began, directing most of his words to Lily. "And you have every right to be. I got into trouble. I made a mistake, and I had to do time. I wanted to stay with you, but I couldn't." "Why didn't you say anything?" Lily interrupted, her small voice firm. "You just disappeared. Mom cried for days." Matthew lowered his head. "I was scared. I did something wrong, something desperate when we lost our medical insurance and your mom needed treatment. I didn't want you to know your father was a criminal. So you'd rather we think you abandoned us." Lily's question carried years of bottled-up hurt. "It was a terrible mistake," Matthew admitted. "I thought it would be better that way, that your mom could say I was traveling for work or something. I never imagined, never dreamed your mom would get worse, that she—" His voice failed him. Tears silently rolled down Lily's cheeks. James fought the urge to hold her, knowing this moment, however painful, was necessary. "Are you going to take us away?" she finally asked, voice trembling. Matthew looked at James, then Sarah, before turning back to his daughter. "Lily, what I want most is to be with you again. But," he hesitated, "I can't take care of you right now. I don't have my own place. I'm starting a new job. It would be selfish to remove you from somewhere safe and happy just because I miss you." The raw honesty of his statement surprised James. He had expected a fight, accusations, maybe even legal threats, not this pained admission of paternal inadequacy. Noah, who had been quiet, suddenly asked, "You don't like us?" The boy's brutal honesty seemed to physically hit Matthew. He swallowed hard. "I love you very much, Noah. More than anything. That's why I did something wrong. I was trying to get money for Mommy's medicine, but I made everything worse." He took a worn-out wallet from his pocket, pulling out some old photos. He showed pictures of Lily as a baby, Clara holding newborn Noah, the family together at a park, preserved fragments of a life before tragedy. "I remember that day," Lily said softly, touching the park photo. "You bought me pink cotton candy, and it turned your whole mouth pink," Matthew recalled, a genuine smile briefly lighting his tired face. Noah leaned in to see better. "That's Mommy?" he asked, heartbreakingly unaware. He had no real memories of his mother. "Yes, son. She loved you very much. She used to sing to you every night." When the visit ended, Lily surprised everyone by asking, "Are you coming back?" Matthew looked at James uncertainly. "If it's allowed, I'd really like to." James, despite the fears consuming him, nodded slightly. The absent, mysterious figure of the father who abandoned them had been replaced by a real man, flawed and remorseful. That night, as James was tucking the children in, Lily asked, "Jamie, do you think he's a good person?" It was a complicated question. "I think he loves you, and he's truly sorry. That doesn't erase what happened, but it's a start." "He said he won't take us away," Lily murmured. "So does that mean we'll keep living with you?" "I hope so. Tomorrow the judge decides." Lily nodded, accepting the uncertainty with a maturity that broke James's heart a little more. The night was long as James envisioned every possible scenario. The fear of losing the children was visceral. In just a few months, Lily and Noah had filled a void in his life he never knew existed. The thought of them being taken away, even by their biological father, was unbearable. The next morning, the family court was intimidatingly formal. James, out in his best suit, sat alongside 3 top lawyers. On the other side of the aisle, Matthew waited alone, nervously clutching a hat in his hands. The disparity couldn't have been more obvious. The hearing began with the usual formalities. James's lawyers presented detailed reports on the care provided to the children, the emotional and financial stability offered, and Lily's and Noah's progress in school. When it was Matthew's turn to speak, he stood up without an attorney by his side. "Your Honor," he began, voice shaky at first but gaining strength, "I won't deny my mistakes. I committed a crime and served my time, but my biggest crime was against my own children. I abandoned them when they needed me most." James watched Judge Holloway, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, listen intently. "I love Lily and Noah more than anything," Matthew continued, "and it's because I love them that I realize I can't give them what they deserve right now. I'm starting over. I have a job as a mechanic's helper. I live in a halfway house. I'm trying to save money to rent a decent place." He paused. "Mr. Morgan has given my kids what I couldn't: security, comfort, stability. They look happy with him, healthy. Lily's going to a school we could never afford. Noah doesn't even remember me." That last sentence was spoken with such evident pain that even the judge looked moved. "I'm not here to regain custody today. That wouldn't be fair to the children. I'm here to ask for a chance to be part of their lives again, gradually, in a way that doesn't disrupt the stability they've finally found." After Matthew's testimony, it was Lily's turn. Tiny in the large courtroom chair, she answered the judge's questions with impressive maturity. "I like living with Jamie," she said firmly. "He takes care of us. He takes me to school and reads stories to Noah. We never go hungry or feel cold." "And your father?" the judge asked gently. "How did you feel seeing him yesterday?" Lily thought for a moment. "I was angry first, and sad, but—" She glanced briefly at Matthew. "I think he was sad too. He said he was sorry." "Would you like to see your father again?" "Yes," she answered after a long pause, "but I want to keep living with Jamie." When all the testimony was done, Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses and studied the documents in front of him. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, charged with anticipation. "This is a complex case," he began at last. "On one hand, We have a biological father who, despite his past errors, shows genuine remorse and a desire to reconnect with his children. On the other hand, we have a guardian who, in a short time, has provided stability, security, and affection to children who have experienced significant trauma. He glanced at another page of notes. The law traditionally favors biological ties, but there is one fundamental condition. The best interest of the children must prevail over all other considerations. James felt his heart race while he waited for the judge's decision. He noticed Matthew was also tense, gripping the hat so tightly it had lost its shape. "Before I give my final ruling," the judge went on, "I need to look further into certain elements of this case. I'm especially interested in how we can balance the father's rights with the emotional stability that children have finally found." He looked from James's lawyers to Matthew, then to Sarah Daniels. "This court will take a 30-minute recess. When we return, I will announce my decision on provisional custody and visitation rights." His gavel struck, and the courtroom began to empty. James remained seated, stunned by the ongoing uncertainty. His lawyers whispered among themselves, analyzing possibilities. On the other side of the aisle, Matthew stared out the window, his silhouette solitary in the afternoon light. 30 minutes, half an hour for the fate of 2 children and his own to be decided. James closed his eyes, trying to find calm, but his mind kept replaying every moment with Lily and Noah, every laugh, every milestone, every bedtime hug. He'd never imagined his life could change so drastically because of a note written by a starving child. That his empty apartment could become a noisy, colorful home. That his heart, locked up for so long, could open to 2 little, brave souls who needed him as much as he, without knowing, needed them. Now it could all end with the drop of a gavel. The judge returned soon, expression unreadable as he resumed his seat. James felt the weight of each passing second as he waited, occasionally making eye contact with Matthew. There was a silent understanding between them now. Both wanted the best for Lily and Noah, though their ideas of best might differ. After carefully considering all aspects of this case, the judge began in a calm voice that echoed in the room. "I've reached a decision that I believe serves the children's best interests." James's heart pounded. Next to him, his lawyers remained composed, though he felt their tension as well. "The law traditionally favors biological bonds, and this court acknowledges a father's inherent right to be part of his children's lives," the judge continued, looking directly at Matthew. "However, the children's well-being must always be the primary consideration." The judge took his documents, adjusting his glasses as he read. "Mr. Miller has shown genuine remorse for his past actions and a commendable desire to reconnect with his children. However, at this time, he lacks the basic conditions necessary to provide a stable and secure environment for Lily and Noah Miller." James felt a wave of hope rising in his chest but controlled his emotions, aware the final verdict was still to come. "On the other hand," the judge went on, "Mr. Morgan has offered the children not just financial stability, but also the emotional support and security they need after a period of significant trauma and uncertainty. Reports from teachers and the social worker indicate the children are thriving under his care." The judge set the papers aside, looking directly at those assembled. "Therefore, this court grants provisional custody of Lily and Noah Miller to Mr. James Morgan for an initial period of 6 months, after which the situation will be reassessed." James closed his eyes briefly, as relief flooded him so intensely he could hardly breathe. 6 months, enough time to strengthen the bonds they had already formed, to keep building a life together. "Additionally," the judge continued, "the court grants Mr. Matthew Miller supervised visitation rights, initially every 2 weeks, under the presence of the assigned social worker. If these visits progress well, supervision may be gradually reduced." The judge looked directly at Matthew. "Mr. Miller, this court acknowledges your efforts to rebuild your life and your desire to be part of your children's lives. I strongly recommend you continue your rehabilitation programs, secure permanent housing, and maintain stable employment. These factors will be considered in the next evaluation." Turning to James, he added, "Mr. Morgan Sakisa, the court trusts you will facilitate the children's relationship with their biological father, provided it remains healthy and constructive. The gavel fell, officially ending the hearing. A hum of conversation filled the room as James's lawyers congratulated him on the victory. However, James's eyes were on Matthew, who remained seated, his face a complex mix of emotions: relief that his children were safe, sadness at his own current inadequacy, and hope for the future relationship he might build with them. After a moment's hesitation, James crossed the room and approached him. "Mr. Miller," he said, extending his hand, "I want you to know I don't intend to cut you out of their lives. If you're truly committed to being part of it in a constructive way, we'll find a path that works for everyone." Matthew looked at the offered hand for a long moment before shaking it. "Thank you," he said simply, voice thick with emotion, "for taking care of them when I couldn't, for giving them what I should have given." He swallowed before adding, "They were lucky to find you." "I was the lucky one," James replied sincerely. There was much more to say, details to arrange, boundaries to set, but at that moment, they'd reached a fundamental understanding. They would both put Lily and Noah's needs above all else. As they left the courthouse, Sarah Daniels caught up with them. "The first supervised visit can be scheduled for next week, if that's okay with everyone." Matthew nodded. "I'm available anytime. My new job has flexible hours." "We have an opening on Thursday afternoon," James suggested, "after the kids get out of school." "If that works for you." "That would be perfect," Matthew agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I'll be looking for my own apartment soon. The manager at the shop mentioned a possible promotion next month." James understood what he was trying to convey, that he was working to improve his situation, so one day he could offer more to his children. "That's great," he replied. "Lily and Noah will be happy to hear it." They parted ways with a handshake, a formal gesture containing the start of something not exactly friendship, but a mutual respect born of shared love for two children. When James arrived home, Mrs. Harris was with the kids in the living room. The relief on her face was clear as soon as she saw his expression. "Everything went well then?" she asked quietly. James nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Noah immediately ran to him, hugging his legs. "Jamie, I drew a dinosaur at school today." "That's the best dinosaur I've ever seen," James replied, picking the boy up, marveling at how something so simple could fill his heart with joy. Lily stood back, her watchful eyes studying James's face, seeking the answer to the question she didn't dare speak out loud. James put Noah down and approached her, kneeling to her level. "The judge decided you'll stay with me," he said softly. Lily didn't smile immediately, absorbing the information. "What about Dad? He'll be able to visit you." "At first, Ms. Daniels will be present for those visits. If everything goes well, over time, but you can spend more time together." Lily nodded, taking in the complexity of the situation with the maturity that always impressed James. "Is he sad?" she asked. "A little," James admitted honestly. "But he's also relieved you're well taken care of. He's working to get his life together, maybe find his own place soon. So we can visit him?" "Exactly." Lily thought for a moment, her little face serious as she considered what that implied. "I guess that would be nice. Noah needs to get to know him better." "What about you?" James asked gently. Lily shrugged, trying to appear casual but failing to hide all her vulnerability. "I'm still mad he left, but..." She hesitated. "Mom always said people can change if they really want to." "Your mom was a wise woman," James answered, moved by Lily's ability to show compassion after all she'd endured. In the days that followed, James's life settled into a new routine. With provisional custody official, he could finally enroll the children formally in school, add them to his health plan, and make all the legal arrangements that had been in limbo. The first supervised visit with Matthew was awkward at first, Lily still guarded. Noah curious but shy, Matthew nervous, trying to find ways to connect with children who barely knew him. But over the weeks, something began to shift. Matthew brought small gifts he could afford, a book for Lily, a toy car for Noah. He told stories about the mother the children never fully got to know. Slowly, he rebuilt bridges that had seemed irreparably burned. James watched these developments with mixed emotions. He still felt residual fear, What if one day Matthew achieved enough stability to claim full custody? What if the kids decided they preferred to live with their biological father? But he also understood more and more that love wasn't a finite resource. Lily and Noah had room in their hearts for both men in their lives, each in different but equally meaningful ways. One night, about a month after the court's decision, James found Lily on the apartment balcony. She sat in a chair too big for her, gazing thoughtfully at the city lights below. In her unicorn pajamas and a haphazard braid, she looked simultaneously so small and so wise. "Can't sleep?" he asked, joining her. Lily shook her head. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "Everything. The past. How things changed." James nodded, giving her space to continue at her own pace. "Jamie," she finally said, turning to look at him directly, "do you promise you'll never leave our lives again?" The simple yet profound question hit James like a wave. He knelt down so he was at her eye level. "I promise, Lily. You're my family now." "Nothing will change that." Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time since they met, James saw Lily cry openly, not trying to hide or restrain her emotions. She hugged him then, her small arms wrapping around his neck with surprising strength. "Even if one day we spend more time with Dad?" she asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Even then," James assured. "There are different kinds of families, Lily, and different ways to love. Your father will always be your father, and that matters. But what we've built here, the three of us, is also real and permanent." She pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes with that uncanny wisdom far beyond her years. She seemed to find the sincerity she was looking for, because she nodded solemnly. "Thank you for losing your wallet, Jamie," she said with a small smile. He laughed, surprised by her remark. "I'm grateful for that too, Lily. More than you can imagine." After tucking Lily back into bed, James returned to the balcony, gazing at the stars that were barely visible through the city's light pollution. He pulled out the leather wallet he now carried like a talisman. Inside it, carefully preserved, was the note that had changed his life. "I'm sorry. My brother is hungry, so I took just one bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back." A simple act of honesty by a desperate child had set off a chain of events that completely transformed three lives: his own, once devoid of meaning despite all his wealth; Lily's and Noah's, previously marked by loss and hardship; and even Matthew's, who had found motivation in the temporary loss of his children to rebuild himself. James tucked the note back into the wallet. The road ahead would no doubt hold challenges, of that he was sure. The gradual reintegration of Matthew into the children's lives, the long-term legal questions, the formative years of Lily and Noah with all their complexities. But on that starry night, with his promise to Lily still echoing in his mind, James felt something he had searched for all his life without knowing it, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of family. It was truly a new beginning for all of them,